option in the status dropdown so that select one and then an ellipsis is not submitted back to the web server. We'll stop the submission of that form before it makes it back to the web server if they have refused to select a status from this drop-down list box. So let's go ahead and set some properties of this control. First of all, we want to set the control to validate as the status drop-down. Here we have some options we're going to have to think through a little bit. First of all, we want the type to be set to string, and we want the value to compare select one ... and we need to change the operator so that it's not equal to select one. So now that we've set these properties, let's go ahead and run our application again. I'll type in some data there, and then I'm just going to leave select one, and notice that whenever I click the OK button, compare validator, I forgot to change the error message property, but you can see that it actually kicked into gear, and by selecting not started, it goes away. Okay? Here's another neat feature as well. Notice that both are now lit up. Both validator controls are lit up because both conditions are found to be in violation of the validation rules that I've set up. And so you don't have to nickel and dime your end user by saying you forgot the name, let them fill out the name, click OK, and then say, oh, well, now you forgot the status, and so forth. You can show them everything that's wrong all at one time. Okay, very cool. Let me go ahead and change some of the properties here. We will change the error message on both of these, and we will change the text to be name is required, and we'll change the text here to be status is, whoops, I think I got this backwards actually. Let's do this. Status is required. Okay, there we go. Name is required. And now we're going to use a third validation control. Great. And that validation control is called the validation summary. And so it will list everything in one big list at the bottom of our web page or at the top, wherever we prefer to put it, so that the user need to only look in one place to get a full explanation of everything that's wrong before trying to resubmit the web page. Now, I have not set any properties for this validation summary control, but by virtue of the fact that it exists on our web form, it's now ready to be used. So I'm going to run my application. I'm not going to fill in name or status, but I am going to click the OK button, and notice that it does put the red asterisks next to name and status, but at the very bottom it gives us the full explanation of the problem. Name is required, status is required, and I can make this as friendly as an error message as I want to. I can even add maybe an opening line that says, please fix the following problems before submitting the form. Very neat. Okay, so let's move on from there. Okay, so we're nearing the end, but I wanted to show you some neat functionality that's contained within the layout toolbar. So we already talked about the purpose for the layout toolbar in the previous video, I believe, or the beginning of this video, and that is to help us determine where we want to, or how we line up the items on our form. So you can see that the left-hand side of the name, status, and department labels are slightly out of a line. Looks like status might be pushed out just a little bit more than name and department. So what I can do is select all the controls, and notice that the name control has white carets around its selection. The others have black or grayed out carets around their selection, which means that whenever we use the layout toolbar, that it's going to use the current settings of the name, because it's the white carets, it's the last selected one, as the settings for, in this case, the left-hand side. So now we're going to click this Align Lefts, and if you saw, it was just a really small adjustment that status and department made. They were moved over to the right just a little bit. Okay. Now the same can be true whenever I select name and the text box. I may want to align their tops or align their middles. That's probably a better way to go about it. So it calculates what the middle XY position is of name, and then it sets that Y position for our text box as well. Now we can use other controls to decrease the horizontal spacing or increase horizontal spacing, or to remove any horizontal spacing, as I did accidentally. Okay, or I have the freedom to select it and use the arrow key on my keyboard to move things around to the right or to the left, up or down. Okay. Now in this particular case, maybe what I want to do is move these a little bit closer together, and I'll stagger these off. First thing I want to do is make the vertical spacing equal, so whatever the spacing is between name and status will be the same spacing between status and department. So here we'll select this button, make it equal, so it moves status up just a little bit. Then we'll want to select all three controls, and we're going to align their lefts. And then I'm going to select the controls here and align their middles. Do the same here. Whoops. And align their middles. Okay. And we'll do the same here and align their middles. Whoops. Kind of made a mistake there. So what can I do? I can go back by selecting Edit, Undo Align Middle. Okay. The reason is because I had the wrong item selected, so I want to make sure department is selected, and I'm going to click Align Middles again, moving everything up. Great. Okay, and I might just move this manually and then use this to align the lefts. And maybe we'll do the same thing here. We'll align the lefts. Okay, so we can get some precision control over the layout of our forms by using the toolbar. So I would encourage you to play around with the toolbar, the layout toolbar, and try your hand at it and see if you can't make it do exactly what you want to do to get some precision control, some fidelity over how your controls are placed on your web form when absolutely positioned. Finally, I want to talk about postback a little bit. And we haven't talked about postback too much up to this point, but you've noted that whenever you run the application and whenever we are not in violation of one of the validation rules that we've set up and we click the OK button, what happens is that a request is made back to the web server passing in the data that we have filled out in our form. Okay? Now, the name of the file does not change. This is called a postback, and we'll talk about this more extensively in lessons 3 and 4. But if you've ever worked with developing web applications, dynamic web applications in the past, you may have posted this data to a page that then saved it into the database before moving it onto a confirmation page or whatever the case might be. Okay? But in this particular case, whenever we post, we're posting back to the original web page. So I click the OK button, get a little message there, and notice the little green bar at the bottom which shows a reload. Okay, now nothing really happened on the page. It flickered a little bit. Notice that the URL is exactly the same, but what happens underneath the hood is that this request, the OK button, in a post is sending back the data in the name field and the status field, and if we had populated any properties for a department and requires approval, all that data would get posted back to our default.aspx page. So if we had a handler, an event handler for the OK button _ click event, that code would fire. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and write some code. I'm going to double click on the OK button. I'm going to put, what do we call that? Status label.text equals success. I think that's what we called this one. Success label. Let me change that real quick here. Let's run our application. And so let's fill in some data here. And when I click the OK button, it's going to post our KLJH from the name field and our not started from the status, marketing and requires approval options selected. And when I do that, it's going to post all that data back to our default.aspx.vb code that we wrote. And notice that it changed then our label from empty to the word success. Now there might be some occasions where we want to do a lookup based on the selection in a drop-down list box. Okay, so by virtue of selecting in progress, we may want to look something up in a database or change the visible options, whether some controls are visible or not on the rest of the web page. How can we do that? There's no button that we can select. Well, we have this option for some controls called auto postback, where we want some control over the selection of a control and then its ultimate posting of that data back to the code that we wrote behind. So let's double click on this this drop-down list box and notice that it creates an event handler called status dropdown selected index changed. So here, what we'll do on the status label is we'll take the status dropdown dot selected item or selected value rather, and so we will list that will say you selected Okay, so let's go ahead and run the application now. But nothing happens. What did we forget? Well, merely by setting that property doesn't mean that the form is going to be posted back. Remember, this code that we're writing only happens once a postback has occurred. The postback is triggered by your web browser. To get the web browser to send that information back over the internet to the web server, we're going to have to set a special property of our control called auto postback. Currently, by default, set to false, but we're going to set it to true. Okay? And now we're going to run our application and select complete. And notice now there was a postback. You saw that flickering of the screen. So it posted our selection back, and it says you selected complete. Very cool. Let's take a look at the source code and what happens behind the scenes to make this happen. I'll expand it out. And notice that the way this is accomplished is through a series of JavaScript. So you can see here's our status dropdown. So it's a select tag, name equals status dropdown. On change, run this JavaScript. Set timeout, do postback, and then it calls some special stuff. And that's how it works behind the scenes. Okay, so we covered a lot of territory in this video. Hope you enjoyed it. We looked at, first of all, some of the windows and how to manipulate those windows within the Visual Studio IDE environment that Visual Web Developer and the rest of the Express Edition tools use. We took a look at the various controls and how to position those controls relatively and absolutely, how to use the toolbar to position those controls, and we talked about postback and auto postback. So, in the next video, we're going to expand on how to write code to handle events like we've done in this example, and how to set properties using the code editor. We'll talk about the special page load event and how to manipulate the page load event to make sure that it doesn't accidentally fire whenever we don't want it to. And we'll talk about some global events that are set in a special file called the global.asax, and a lot more. So I hope you enjoyed this video and enjoy the rest of the videos. If you enjoyed it, please visit www.learnvisualstudio.net to download and watch over 400 videos just like this one, aimed at all skill levels on many different topics related to C#, Visual Basic, ASP.NET, and more. Thank you.